Expense ratio. How important is it when it comes to assessing your funds? The regulator, SEBI, thinks it is mighty important, and that's the reason why it has been regularly tweaking expense ratios to ensure that your cost of holding funds is not very high. And recently, SEBI has come up with a discussion paper on multiple issues, key among which is rationalization of expense ratio, or in other words, how to reduce expense ratio further. So, when it comes to expense ratio, what exactly do you look at and how do you assess funds based on expense ratio? Let's use PrimeInvestor's mutual fund expense ratio calculator. It is free for all. The link is available below. Let me explain how you can use just 3 points to understand whether your fund has a high expense ratio and whether you should go for it or not. Before we start looking at it, the first thing that you need to understand is that you first assess funds based on performance and not based on expense ratio. The reason being, you might have a fund with very low expense ratio and yet not be performing well. So, your first screener or your first level of filter should be looking at performance of funds. Of course, you can use our mutual fund screener, you can use our buy hold sell tools, or you can simply go with prime funds that we have too. But if you already have been given a set of funds, say by your advisor or your distributor, and you want to make sure and they have told you it is high on performance, you want to make sure that their expense ratio is reasonable. So let's use this tool to understand how you go about this. The first thing is just comparing the expense ratio of funds with peers. You cannot be comparing the expense ratio of a debt fund with an equity fund or a hybrid fund with a large cap fund and so on. So let's stick to the expense ratio within each category. Here I have taken the flexi cap category just for you to kind of make the comparison. So we have here the average for the regular plan, which is 2.04, the average for the direct plan, which is 0.82, and the average difference between the regular plan and the direct plan. I'll explain to you why all these are important. The first step is just looking at your own fund. Let's say you chose HDFC Flexi Cap Fund. Its regular expense ratio is 1.61. Okay, if your distributor has suggested it, that's below average of 2.04. Now, let us say your distributor is actually, recommending you another a fund, say Quant Flexi Cap Fund. Its expense ratio is 2.33, which is way higher than the category average and way higher than many of the other funds. So, what happens here is that you do know that this has a higher expense ratio, but where is such a higher expense ratio coming from? What component really adds to it? For this, you need to understand direct plans. The reason is this: if you have a fund with very high regular expense ratio and it's still a performing fund, you don't have to give up on the fund entirely. You can look at the direct plan of these funds and understand if this direct plan expense ratio is well within the limit. You can actually invest in this fund using the direct plan. So that's the reason behind not just comparing with peers, but at a next level. That's point number 2, looking at where its expense ratio is in the direct plan. So in this same fund, if you see Quant Flexi Cap, we saw that the regular plan was very high and the direct plan expense ratio is 0.58%, which is far lower than the category average of 0.82%. Why is this differential so high? So then that takes me to the next point: 1.75% differential, far higher than the average differential in this category for a direct and regular, which is stands at 1.22. It essentially means that this fund is paying a lot as commission for the distributor, right? So after all, the difference should be between direct and regular is primarily on account of the commission. It should only be theoretically on account of the commission, although there are small irregularities according to SEBI on this accounting. But primarily, the difference is because of the commission that is paid to distributors. When I say distributors, it could be the banks, your relationship manager sell you funds, the banks get that commission. It could be your agents, anybody who basically sells the fund for a commission. So this is very evident. If please understand, I'm not recommending any fund here, but if this fund ticks your performance metrics, or you have been given it because it's high on performance. You don't have to completely omit it. You can look at the direct plan expense. And then also, if you think this is really low, you can still go ahead and pick it. So in other words, if the difference between the regular and direct is very high in a fund, it basically means you should not be going for the regular plan of that fund. So step A is basically looking at a fund with its peers, and if it's regular plan is much lower than peers and it's still good on performance, you've probably been given a good fund and not just for commission, so you can simply go with it. But if I find the expense ratio of the regular plan very high, then the step 2 is to compare with the difference between the regular and direct. And then if the difference is very high, it means you should not be going for the regular plan. You are far better off going for the direct plan in the same fund. So these are two things. The third important thing when it comes to expense ratio is you can give a reasonable leeway. Here in our tool, since we have given the category average, it serves as a good benchmark for you to compare. But this leeway is quite high, as in, the expense ratio differential can be well over 1% with the regular and direct in the case of equity funds. But when it comes to debt funds, the overall expense ratio itself is very low. So you cannot really afford to give too much leeway there. Let me just take the example of debt short duration fund. In debt short duration fund, the average expense ratio you will see is around 1% for the regular, and it's just 0.34% in direct. Now, this almost 70 basis points, 0.7%, makes a big difference to your returns. Because in debt, as you know, let's take your FD. Your FD, some bank giving you, say, 50 basis points more, 0.5% more is a big deal, right? It's the same with, funds. Here we have a difference of 70 basis points. And since debt cannot give you high digit returns, the single digit returns can be impacted even if 20 30 basis point of difference arises because of cost. So in debt, it is even more important to understand whether you are being given a high expense fund in case the fund's performance is good. And please understand, there's another column here where we have given the assets under management, AUM. Typically, for large, funds with large AUM, the expense ratio should come down. So that's how it works, because it works at a slab level. SEBI has prescribed various slabs. So if the expense ratio is still high for a very large AUM fund, you do know that it's not a great idea to be sticking, especially to a regular plan. Let me just give you an example here. Let's just take a Kotak bond short term. It has 17,300 crore of assets, which is really large, and its expense ratio on regular is still 1.17 as opposed to just 0.36 in the direct plan. So there is a simple 80 basis points that will immediately add to your returns simply by holding the direct plan as opposed to the regular. So this is an important thing that you need to consider. So a fund, even if a fund is small, you do understand it's a new fund, it's trying to market itself better, so it's paying its distributors a little higher, so you could give some leeway there. Again, if the differential is still below the category average, it's okay. But with large AUM, you do know that it makes no sense for you, especially in debt where every basis point will matter. So these are basically the 3 points to summarize. One, you look at the comparison with peers, and then you look at the differential between regular and direct. Where the differential is too high, especially higher than the category average, you are better off going with a direct plan. And all of this after looking at performance. So, how does all of this impact the performance per se? I mean, what if you still decide to go with a fund where the expense ratio is quite high under the regular plan? If it's a high earning fund, let me just take an example here. I'm going to take example here of Navi FlexiCap. You know, Navi FlexiCap has a high difference. If you will, just see the fund here. You know, it's 2.29% under the regular plan, 0.43 and 1.86. How has this impacted the return of the fund? Just look at the 1 year and 3 year. I'm not taking very short period, but this fund doesn't have a long history either. So I'm just taking the 1 year and 3 year here. Look at the return differentials. It is well over 2 percentage points. That's a lot of return, especially at a period when mutual funds are struggling to beat their benchmark. So more reason here that regular plan makes very little sense to you, right? So this is the kind of impact that a difference here. What was the difference we saw here? It was almost 1.86. So 1.86% difference in expense ratio has contributed to more than 2% difference in final returns that you get out of this fund. So next time you have been given funds either by your distributor or you have already filtered funds, run a check using our expense ratio calculator. It's available for all. The link is given below. Do try it out and give your comments. Do subscribe to our channel and keep watch for more videos. Thank you.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.